At my dad's while reading, I already knew the script. House to mom, company to my golden child sister, maybe a pity scrap for me. Then the lawyer said, "There's one more page your father added in secret." And suddenly a forgotten hill outside town was about to rip our family in half. My name is Noah Clark. I'm 35 years old, and on the morning of my father's will reading, my hands wouldn't stop shaking on the steering wheel. The sky over Maple Ridge was that dull, washed-out gray I've always hated. The kind that makes everything look tired. The courthouse and the law offices downtown rose out of the mist like they were judging you before you even parked. I pulled in front of Harper and Lowe, the little two-story brick building my dad had sworn by for decades, killed the engine, and just sat there for a second, listening to the ticking of cooling metal. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat, not because I was expecting anything good, but because there was a finality to it. Whatever got read in that room would be the last time my father had any say in my life. And if I was being honest, after 35 years of being the family disappointment, I wasn't expecting him to say much. The text from my mother had been short, almost dismissive. Well, reading for Dad. 10 a.m. Harper and Lowe. Be on time, Noah. No, please. No, how are you holding up? Just be on time. Like I was an employee who'd already used up all my sick days. I glanced up at the second-floor window. Through the thin lace curtains, I could see moving shapes. One of them tossed her head in that familiar way, hair swinging over a designer blazer. Lily, my little sister. The sun, moon, and stars of the Clark family. I forced my fingers off the steering wheel, grabbed my worn leather jacket from the passenger seat, and stepped out into the cold. The wind slipped under my shirt and crawled down my spine, and I shivered, though it wasn't just from the temperature. 15 minutes early. Of course, if there's one thing life as the other child teaches you, it's how to be invisible and early. Visible and late? That gets you noticed, and not in a good way. The staircase up to Harper and Lowe's offices creaked under my boots. The hallway smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. At the end of it, the frosted glass door with Harper and Lowe, Yescu, etched in black letters waited like a verdict. I took a breath, turned the knob, and walked in. They were already there. My mother sat in the center of the leather sofa, back perfectly straight, ankles crossed, a navy pencil skirt hugging her knees. She clutched a tissue in one hand, but her eyes were dry, the rims just carefully reddened with eyeliner. A string of pearls I'd never seen before rested at her throat. Morning chic. Next to her, on the left, was my Uncle Ray, Dad's older brother, staring into his coffee like it might suddenly tell him how to feel. On her right sat Lily, legs crossed, heel dangling off one expensive shoe, scrolling idly on her phone. All three of them looked up when the door clicked shut behind me. My mother's gaze slid over me, taking in the faded jeans, the scuffed boots, the jacket that had seen better days. For a fraction of a second, something like embarrassment flickered over her face, like she wished I'd at least tried to look the part. Then her mouth tightened into that familiar, thin line. "You're on time," she said. "Good." Lily's lips curved into a little smirk, one I recognized from every family dinner from the age of 10 onward. The one that said, of course he'd be on time today. This is the closest he'll ever get to something important. "Hey, Mom. Uncle Ray. Lil." I nodded at each of them, keeping my voice even. "Noah." Lily's voice was smooth as glass. "Corporate training and good teeth. You look the same." There was an edge there, but I didn't bite. I just took a seat in the lone armchair opposite them, the one that made it feel like we were on two different sides of a courtroom. Which, in a way, we were. Mr. Clark. Mr. Harper, Dad's lawyer, stepped out from his office, papers in hand, the faint smell of aftershave following him. "Sorry for your loss. We're just waiting on." He checked his watch. No, we're all here." "That's good." He shook my hand, firm and professional, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, like he remembered me as the kid who used to sit on the waiting room chair reading comic books while Dad and Mom met with him about adult things. Back when I was still just a kid and not yet the black sheep. "Before we begin," Mr. Harper said, "I want to offer my condolences. Your father was quite a presence." My mother gave a polite little nod, the kind she reserved for church ladies and country club acquaintances. "Yes, thank you, Charles." Lily slipped her phone into her bag with exaggerated care, then leaned back, one arm over the back of the sofa. Her posture said relaxed. The tiny gleam in her, I said expectant. She knew why we were here. She'd known for years. You'd think they could have just emailed me. But whatever, she joked at the wake, glass of red wine in hand, voice low but just loud enough for my mother to hear. Some things have to be done the old-fashioned way, I guess. Mom had chuckled softly, the way she did whenever Lily made a comment with just the right amount of bite. Your father insisted on tradition, she'd said. You know how he was. I didn't know how he was. I also knew how he'd been with me. Growing up in the Clark household was like living in a two-dimensional painting where only one figure was ever in focus. Every fridge drawing, every honorable mention, every mediocre piano recital of Lily's was an event. Mom would clap until her hands were red. Dad would pull out his old Nikon and take photos like she'd just won a Nobel Prize for coloring inside the lines. Me? I was the kid in the background, holding the coat and making sure the car was gassed up. When I came home with a B+ in math after grinding all semester, Dad's only comment was, "Your sister never brought home less than an A. What are you doing with your time, son?" When Lily crashed the family SUV at 17 because she was texting while driving, Dad bought her a new car so she wouldn't be traumatized by the accident, and Mom made her hot chocolate. When I missed curfew by 30 minutes at 18 because my coworker's car broke down and I stayed to help, Mom stood at the door with crossed arms and a lecture about irresponsibility that lasted 45 minutes. Every family has their patterns. Ours were just carved a little deeper than most. The golden child and the reminder. Lily could do no wrong. I could do no right. By the time I was 22, I'd stopped trying. I moved out into a tiny studio apartment over a laundromat, worked construction jobs and night shifts at warehouses while Lily went off to college on Dad's dime, and came home with a degree in marketing and a job waiting in his company. I saw it all on social media. The first day as marketing coordinator at Clark & Co. Posts, the boomerang videos of champagne glasses clinking at rooftop bars, captioned, "To the future CEO." The comments from Mom, "My brilliant girl. So proud of you." The texts I got from Dad, scattered over the years, were different. "You know we can't keep bailing you out, Noah. When are you going to get serious? Maybe if you'd stayed in school like your sister." It wasn't that I was failing. I was working hard. I just wasn't working in a way they approved of. Manual labor, night shifts, union meetings. Those weren't ambitious. Those were what people did when they hadn't made something of themselves. At least, that's how my parents saw it. The few times I'd gone back to the house for holidays, I'd seen the way Dad watched Lily move through the room in her tailored dresses and confident smile. The way he lit up when she talked about quarterly reports and expansion plans. He'd say things like, "One day all this will be yours, Lil," sweeping his arm out to indicate the house, the company, the life. He never said that to me. Not once. I don't think he ever imagined I'd be in the room when they read what all this meant on paper. And yet, there I was. Mr. Harper cleared his throat, shuffling papers, drawing my attention back to the present. My heart gave a sharp thud. My palms were sweating. "Thank you all for coming," he said, in that careful lawyer tone that tried to be both warm and utterly neutral. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Mr. Thomas Clark." Hearing Dad's full name like that, stripped of Dad and Sir and everything else, did something to me. It made him feel both larger and smaller, like a character in someone else's story. "Now," Mr. Harper went on, "I know this is an emotional time, so I'll keep things as clear as possible. Thomas and I updated this document a final time about 6 months ago. 6 months ago. I did the math without meaning to. That would have been right after his first heart scare. The one Mom had texted me about in a single sentence. Dad in hospital. Stable. No need to come. Lily's here." I'd been between shifts, filthy and exhausted. I'd stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard, then put the phone down. I told myself that if they didn't want me there, I wasn't going to push. Now I tasted the bitterness of that decision at the back of my throat. Lily shifted on the sofa, crossing her legs the other way. The leather creaked. She glanced at Mom, and the corner of her mouth twitched up again, the faintest hint of a smirk they thought I couldn't see. They weren't nervous. Why would they be? All my life, they'd been told the same story, over and over. Lily is the future. Lily will inherit. Noah, well, Noah will be fine. Fine on his own. Fine somewhere else. Fine with nothing. That's what favoritism does to a family. It doesn't just give one child more. It teaches everyone involved exactly what they're worth. Mr. Harper adjusted his glasses, glanced around the room as if to make sure we were all settled, and opened the folder with a crisp snap. "Shall we begin?" he asked. My mother nodded, serene and composed. "Yes, Charles. Let's get this over with." I leaned back in my chair, feeling the worn leather under my shoulders, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I told myself I already knew how this would go. I told myself you can't be disappointed by something you never expected to have. I told myself a lot of lies in that moment, just to keep breathing. Mr. Harper started with the formalities. The last will and testament of Thomas Clark, dated, he read the date. The witnesses, the boilerplate about sound mind and legal capacity. His voice was steady, practiced, he'd done this 100 times. I watched his lips move, but the words washed over me like static. Sound mind. My father had been in a sound mind when he'd chosen what I was worth. That was supposed to be comforting. Then he cleared his throat and moved into the real part. "First," he said, "your father directed that all outstanding debts, taxes, and funeral expenses be paid from the liquid assets in his estate before any distributions." Uncle Ray snorted softly. "Tom was allergic to debt from the day he was born," he muttered. "Wouldn't buy a lawnmower if he could fix the old one." Mom shot him a look, half warning, half affection. Ray sank back into silence. I remembered that about Dad. The way he'd yell if I'd left a light on in an empty room. "Money doesn't grow on trees, Noah," he'd snap. "You think electricity is free?" But when Lily wanted dance lessons, fencing lessons, a semester abroad, the money had come from somewhere. "Next," Mr. Harper went on, "Thomas leaves the sum of $10,000 to his brother, Raymond Clark, as a personal bequest." Uncle Ray blinked, straightened in his chair. "Well, I'll be damned," he said under his breath, then caught himself. Sorry, Liz." Mom gave a tight smile. "He always said he'd do something for you, Ray," she said. "Now you can finally fix that fishing boat." Ray's eyes glistened for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, maybe I will." It was a small thing, but it landed in my chest like a pebble. Dad had thought about his brother, remembered a promise. I wondered what, if anything, he'd remembered about me. "Your father also left specific personal items to certain individuals," Harper continued. "His collection of vintage watches is to go to his nephew, Daniel Clark. His set of golf clubs and associated equipment to his business partner, Michael Saunders." He went down a short list. Objects, mostly tied to people who'd shared those hobbies with him. It made sense in that neat, storybook way Dad liked. "For you, Mrs. Clark," Harper said, looking at my mother. "Thomas leaves his wedding band, his personal journals, and the contents of his home office, including his framed awards and photographs." Mom's chin lifted almost imperceptibly. Her fingers tightened around the tissue until her knuckles paled. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course. Those items weren't worth much, financially. But symbolically, it was huge. The band, the journals, the office. That was his inner life. The part of him that had nothing to do with spreadsheets and real estate holdings." I glanced down at my own hands. No ring, no mementos. Just calloused fingers and a faint scar across my knuckle from a construction site mishap years ago. Once, when I was 12, I'd asked if I could have his old fishing rod. The one he'd used to take me to the lake when I was little, before Lily's ballet recitals had started filling every weekend. He'd frowned like I'd asked for his left lung. "That rod's worth money, Noah," he'd said. "Maybe one day I'll sell it. Put it toward Lily's tuition. You don't need it. You barely have the patience to sit still." A week later, I saw the rod in a corner of the garage, dusty and forgotten. Now it had probably gone to someone who actually fished with him. Next, Harper's voice shifted slightly. "We come to the primary assets of the estate. The family home located at 27 Willow Lane, all its contents not otherwise specified, and the adjacent land." Here we go, I thought. Lily sat up straighter, the little smirk tugging at the corners of her lips again. Mom's posture relaxed in that particular way that meant she already knew what was coming and approved. "To my beloved wife, Elizabeth Clark," Harper read. "If she survives me, I leave a life estate in our marital home, to have and to hold for as long as she lives or wishes to reside there. Upon her death or vacating the property, full ownership and title of the home and land shall pass to my daughter, Lily Clark." Mom exhaled slowly. Lily's lips curved fully this time. The smirk blossomed into a satisfied smile. "That's generous," Mom said delicately. But what she meant was, as it should be. Lily turned her head slightly, just enough to angle her smile at me like a beam of light off cut glass. You can always visit, Noah, she said lightly. You know, if Mom allows it. Something hot flickered under my skin, then died. I'd long ago made peace with the fact that Willow Lane wasn't mine. The house had never really felt like my house, even when I lived there. It had been their stage and Lily's dressing room. Still, hearing it cemented like that, in legal language, made it sting. Harper moved on. Regarding Clark and Company holdings, including all controlling shares, voting rights, and related business interests, he paused, looked up. Your father placed these into the Clark family trust 2 years ago, with a clear line of succession. I remembered when that happened. Sort of. There'd been a celebration at the house. Champagne. A big cake with the company logo on it. Dad had given a little speech about legacy and the future. Lily had been radiant, wearing a sleek black dress, standing at his right hand like a co-host. I'd been there, holding a beer in the corner like hired help, listening. That night, after most people had left, I'd overheard him in the study with Harper, half the door open. So this way, the transition will be seamless, Harper had said. Your daughter will have full control upon your passing. Your wife is co-trustee until then. And Noah? Dad had asked, almost as an afterthought. We should leave something, so it doesn't look bad. You know how people talk. Yes, Harper had replied. Of course. We'll add a cash bequest appropriate to your wishes. But the trust, that should be as we outlined. It aligns with what you've told me for years. Lily is the natural successor. I hadn't heard the number, just the shape of it. A consolation prize. Now, in the conference room, I braced myself. As outlined in the Clark Family Trust document, Harper said, Elizabeth Clark retains managing control of Clark and Company holdings until such time as she steps down or passes. At that point, your father designated your daughter, Lily Clark, as sole successor trustee and beneficiary of all controlling shares of the company. He looked at Lily. Congratulations, Miss Clark. Your father had great confidence in your leadership. Lily's eyes shone. She tried for a modest smile, but pride radiated off her. Of course he did, she said. He trained me for it. Mom reached over and squeezed her hand. They shared a look, something passed between them. A private victory. I sat there, feeling the room tilt slightly. Clark and Company wasn't just some paper asset. It was everything he'd sweated over for 40 years. Every late night, every deal negotiated at our dining room table, every missed baseball game, all funneled neatly into Lily's hands. I told myself again that I had expected this, that it was logical, that Dad had always said you don't put something as big as a company into unsteady hands, and that, in his eyes, mine had never stopped shaking. But logic doesn't anesthetize. It just explains why the blade is there. And finally, Harper said, we come to the remaining liquid assets, your father's savings, investment portfolios not tied to the trust, and miscellaneous holdings. He flipped to the next page. The rustle of paper sounded loud. These total approximately $1.8 million after taxes and obligations. Uncle Ray's head snapped up. Even Mom's eyes widened slightly. Lily's pupils dilated. I swallowed. 1 million, Harper read. I leave to my daughter, Lily Clark, in gratitude for her dedication to the family business and her role in carrying our name forward. I watched Lily's posture change almost invisibly. Her chin lifted. That same practiced, polite corporate smile spread over her face. Dad, she murmured, half to herself, like a toast. You old softy. Mom dabbed at the corner of her eye with the tissue she hadn't actually used until now. He was always so proud of you, she said. This would have meant a lot to him. And the remaining $800,000, Harper continued. I distribute as follows: $200,000 to my wife, Elizabeth Clark, in recognition of her partnership and sacrifice. $50,000 each to be donated to the charities listed in Exhibit. $50,000 to my brother, Raymond, and... He paused, squinting at the page. His brows drew together slightly, just for a heartbeat, like something on the paper surprised him. My own heart stuttered. And $200,000, he read slowly. To my son, Noah Clark. The room went preternaturally still. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The blood was roaring in my ears so loudly that his voice sounded like it was underwater. 200,000. I blinked. I what? Lily's head snapped toward me, then back to Harper. That must be a mistake, she said quickly, a laugh at the edge of her words. Dad already arranged things for Noah when you know, when he sold that old truck. He said that was Noah's share, didn't he, Mom? Mom's jaw tightened. Charles, there was steel under the sugar now. Are you sure you're reading that correctly? Harper adjusted his glasses. Yes, he said, voice going a little drier. 200,000 to Mr. Noah Clark. I drafted these provisions with your husband myself. He glanced over at me. Your father wanted you to have something you could use to get a fresh start, Mr. Clark. A fresh start. The words tasted like sawdust. They all looked at me then. 3 pairs of eyes, 3 different expressions. Uncle Ray's were sympathetic, even a little relieved. Maybe he'd worried I'd get nothing at all. Mom's were tight, calculating, hurt pride shimmering just beneath the surface. This wasn't how she'd pictured the pie chart. Lily's were something else. Shock, quickly smoothed over with something sharp and ugly. Her mouth pinched at the corners, then flattened. Of course, she said finally. Dad was generous. But the way she said generous made it sound more like reckless. In that moment, sitting there with everyone's gaze on me and the number hanging in the air like smoke, I didn't feel grateful. I felt exposed. 200,000. It was a lot. It was also, mathematically, a fraction. A carefully measured one. Enough that no one could say I'd been cut out. Not enough to disrupt the story. Your sister never brought home less than an A. One day, all this will be yours, Lil. I could hear his voice like he was in the room. As outlined, that concludes the primary distributions of the estate, Harper said, closing the folder with a soft thump. Mom exhaled. Lily leaned back, some tension leaking out of her shoulders. Uncle Ray rubbed his temples. That wasn't so bad, Mom said quietly. He did what was right. What he'd always planned. Lily nodded, already mentally spending numbers and votes of confidence. I'll make him proud, she said. I'll make sure the company stays in the family. That's what he wanted. I just sat there, numb, the weight of money I hadn't expected pressing against the bruise of every memory. Harper hesitated. Then, slowly, he opened the folder again. There is, he said, flipping to the back, brow furrowing. There is one more page. For a second, no one moved. The words hung there in the air like he'd just said, there's a bomb under the table. One more page. Mom repeated, frowning. I thought Thomas said everything was settled. Lily let out a short, breathy laugh that didn't match her eyes. Probably just some sentimental note, she said, waving a hand. You know how Dad liked to hear himself talk. Her discounting tone slipped a little on the last word. She was curious. We all were. Harper slid the clipped stack aside and pulled out a single sheet from the back of the folder. It was different from the others. Even from where I sat, I could see that. The main will was all neat Times New Roman, black ink, formal paragraphing. This page was typed too, but there were handwritten notes in the margins. Corrections. A signature that trailed off slightly like his hand had been shaking. This, Harper said quietly, is a codicil. An addendum to the will your father signed 2 weeks after the main document. Dated 4 months ago. It supersedes earlier provisions where there is conflict. My mother went very still. Supersedes? She said carefully. In what way, Charles? Harper didn't answer her directly. He was back in lawyer mode now, that mixture of distance and obligation. He cleared his throat, and as he began to read, his eyes flicked toward me for the briefest moment. To my family, he read, and to whoever is sitting in that office with Charles when this is read. If you've made it to this last page, it means you've already heard what I thought I wanted. The neat version. He paused, glancing up. Mom's brows were pulled together now, a faint line between them. Lily shifted uncomfortably. But things have a way of looking different, Harper continued. When you're staring at the ceiling of a hospital room and a machine is breathing for you. I remembered the text. Dad in hospital. Stable. No need to come. Lily's here. I've spent a lot of years telling myself I was doing what was best for this family. Harper read, his voice low. Building a business I could hand down. Giving my children what I never had. Pushing them to be their best selves. That's how I justified it. His gaze flicked toward Lily, then toward me. But I also know, he went on, that somewhere along the way, pushing turned into favoring. Favoring turned into neglecting. And neglecting one child for the sake of another, he read carefully, is not something I'm proud of, no matter how I spin it. The tissue in my mother's hand stilled. Her knuckles were white. That's not fair, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. That's not. Harper kept reading. If Charles is doing his job, he read, then by now you've already heard how the house and the company are to be handled. That was the plan I made when I still believed I had plenty of time to fix my mistakes in other ways. I stared at the page, trying to imagine my father hunched over a desk, oxygen tank nearby, scratching notes on the margins while everyone else thought he was resting. But lying in that hospital bed, Harper continued, I realized something I should have realized years ago. You don't get infinite chances to do right by your kids. You get what you get, and you can't assume they'll wait around forever for you to be the father they needed. My throat tightened. I swallowed hard. So this is me, Harper read, trying not to leave the fixing for some other lifetime. Lily let out a slow breath, a flicker of irritation crossing her face. Dad loved his dramatic speeches, she said, but her voice sounded thinner than usual. Harper's eyes moved down the page. I'm not going to undo the entire structure, he read. The house should still be your mother's as long as she wants it. The business, whatever happens, it needs steady hands. Lily, you've worked hard to be that. I'm not taking that away. Relief flooded my sister's face for a fraction of a second, quickly masked. But there's something else I haven't told any of you about, Harper went on. Something I set up years ago, when an old friend from my service days gave me advice I was too stubborn to follow properly. He paused, eyebrows rising slightly. This part is about a separate asset, he said, looking at the three of us now. One that is not inside the Clark family trust. Mom's head snapped toward him. Separate asset? She repeated. Thomas never mentioned. Liz, Uncle Ray said sharply. Let the man read. Harper nodded, eyes dropping back to the page. 10 years ago, he read, I bought a piece of land outside of town. An old orchard and the hill behind it. Some of you might know it as Miller's Ridge. At the time, everyone thought I'd lost my mind. What do you want with a dead orchard? They said. I blinked. Miller's Ridge. The name stirred something in me. Mornings spent climbing over rusted wire fences with my friend Kyle, stealing half-rotten apples, and pretending we were explorers. What nobody knew, Harper continued, was that I didn't buy it for Clark and Company. I bought it under a separate holding company, Ridgeview LLC, in my own name. No ties to the business. No ties to the main trust. Mom's jaw clenched. He told me that was for an expansion, she said sharply. He said, Elizabeth, Harper said gently. He asked that this be read in full. Her mouth snapped shut. Back then, Harper read. I thought maybe I'd build something there one day. A cabin. A retreat. A place for the family to get away from numbers and meetings. Then time passed. The land just sat. Taxes got paid. Trees rotted. Nothing happened. At least, that's what everyone thought. He turned the page over. The back was filled with more of that cramped, stubborn script. What I didn't tell anyone, he read, is that 3 years ago, a surveyor I hired found something under that ridge. The room seemed to contract. Even the ticking clock on the wall grew loud. A seam, Harper read, of lithium-bearing clay and rare earth elements. A big one. Bigger than even he first thought. I kept my mouth shut. Started leasing exploration rights to a mining company under strict terms. Attorneys. NDAs. I didn't want it tied up in Clark and Company. I wanted it separate. Clean. Rare earth elements. Lithium. Even with my spotty financial literacy, I knew those weren't small words. Those were the kind of words that made investors drool and environmentalists rage. By the time I'm gone, Harper continued, Ridgeview LLC will own full mineral rights to Miller's Ridge and all associated exploratory contracts. By Charles's calculations, the current conservative valuation of that land and those rights is in the several millions, with potential to be much more if the mine proves out. He looked up. That flicker of surprise in his eyes earlier made sense now. Even he hadn't seemed fully used to the numbers. Several millions. My mother had gone very pale. Lily's mouth was open, just a fraction. Uncle Ray was staring at Harper like the man had started speaking another language. That can't be right, Mom whispered. We've never seen any paperwork about this. Your husband kept it quite private, Harper said. He brought me in only after the initial surveys. I sat numb, mind spinning, thinking of that dead orchard we used to joke about. The one Dad always seemed strangely protective of whenever it came up in conversation. He'd always brushed it off. It's just land, he'd say. One day it'll be worth something. Which brings me to my point, Harper read, drawing us back. Miller's Ridge is not part of the family trust. It is not tied to the company. It is not encumbered by business debts. I have full discretion over who it goes to. Silence rained down heavy and absolute. I could feel Lily's gaze on Harper like a laser. And I've decided, Harper read, enunciating each word, that it should go to the child who never got anything without being told why they didn't deserve it. My lungs forgot how to work. I leave Ridgeview LLC, Harper said, his voice quieter now, and all rights, titles, and interests in Miller's Ridge and its mineral rights, solely and completely to my son, Noah Clark. The world narrowed to a pinpoint. For a moment, everything went muffled, like one of those slow-motion shots in a movie where the sound drops out and all you see are mouths moving. Mom's lips parted. A strangled sound escaped her. Lily shot to her feet, knocking over her bag. It hit the floor with a thud, pins, and a lipstick rolling out. What? She snapped. No, that's insane. Dad would never. Sit down, Lily, Uncle Ray said sharply. She ignored him. Charles, this has to be a mistake, she said, voice rising. Dad told me everything was set. He said the business and the land. That land is not in the business, Harper cut in, a rare edge in his voice. I've seen the corporate filings. Ridgeview is separate. Your father was very clear about that. Mom swallowed hard. Her eyes were glossy now, but not with grief. With something that looked a lot like anger. He never discussed this with me, she said. 40 years of marriage, and he was hiding assets. Harper's expression softened, but he didn't back down. He wasn't hiding them from you, Elizabeth. He was reserving them. For this purpose. This purpose, Lily repeated, turning on him. Giving my screw-up brother a personal gold mine? For what? Being a martyr? Her words hit me like slaps, but there wasn't the usual sting. There was too much else going on. Harper glanced at me, then back at the page. Your father explains his reasoning, he said. If you'll let me finish. Lily sank back onto the couch like someone had cut her strings. Her eyes drilled into me, but I couldn't meet them. My gaze was glued to Harper's lips. Noah, he read, voice softening. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't manage to say any of this to your face. That's on me. I know what you probably think, that I'm trying to buy forgiveness on the way out. Maybe you're right. Maybe you'll hate me anyway. Maybe you won't even touch the land out of spite. I deserve that. He paused, cleared his throat. Even he seemed affected now. But whether you use it, sell it, build a cabin on it, or let the trees rot for another 30 years, Harper continued. I wanted there to be something in this mess that was yours. Not because your sister didn't earn what she earned. She did. But because you never got the benefit of my doubt. And that's a debt I can't pay any other way now. The words blurred. I realized my vision was swimming. This isn't about fairness on a spreadsheet, Harper read, steady but quiet. It's about me admitting, in writing where nobody can pretend they misheard, that I loved you, even when I acted like I didn't. That I saw you, even when I acted like you were in the way. You held doors, you filled gas tanks, you worked jobs you didn't brag about. You didn't get speeches and parties and trust documents drawn up in your honor. You got lectures in silence. I can't undo that, but I can leave you a piece of ground and say, this is yours. Without conditions, without comparisons. Do with it what I never did. Build something that feels like home. The room was so quiet I could hear the ticking of that wall clock again. It sounded like a hammer hitting nails. Harper exhaled, eyes scanning the last lines. If Elizabeth or Lily are hearing this and thinking I've gone soft in the head, he read, I can assure you, Charles will tell you I was very lucid when I signed this. I knew exactly what I was doing. I'm not punishing you. I'm trying, finally, not to punish him. Harper's voice dropped to a near whisper for the last sentence. I hope you can all live with that. I haven't always lived in a way that deserves your forgiveness. That's between you and God. But this part is between me and my son. He let the page fall gently to the table. No one spoke. My chest felt like someone had hollowed it out with a dull spoon. I didn't know whether I wanted to laugh, cry, or walk out and never see any of them again. All those years of being measured and found wanting. All the birthdays missed, the holidays ruined by comparisons. And now, from beyond the grave, he was what? Apologizing with a hill full of rare earth metals? I could still hear his real-time comments, from back when he wasn't writing heartfelt codicils. You think electricity is free? Why can't you be more like your sister? This is the last time we bail you out, Noah. Now here he was, bailing me out in the biggest way imaginable. Lily was the first to break. "This is insane," she said, her voice tight, brittle. "You can't honestly expect us to just accept that Dad took a literal gold mine and handed it to." She gestured at me, a sharp flick of her hand. "Him. He didn't hand it to me." I heard myself say, my voice rough. He set it aside. Years ago, and never said a word to us." Mom's voice rose, leaking all the strain she'd been trying to hide. "Not once. I sat with him through every board meeting, every property deal, every late-night call. He trusted me with everything. And this he keeps secret. It's not about trust, Liz," Uncle Ray said quietly. "It's about guilt." She rounded on him. "Don't you start, Raymond. You don't know." "I know what I saw." Ray shot back, more force in his voice than I'd heard in years. "I saw him brag on Lily across every Sunday dinner like she hung the moon. I saw him come down on Noah twice as hard for half the mistakes. I saw you do it too." The words hung there, raw and ugly. My mother's mouth opened and closed. For a moment, she looked like she might deny it on reflex. Then she just deflated. Her shoulders sagged. The tissue, crumpled beyond use, fell from her hand onto the floor. "We did what we thought was right," she said tightly. "We pushed the one who could handle it. We expected more from the one with more potential. The one who could handle it. Meaning me." I almost laughed. The sound that came out was somewhere between a cough and a choke. "You expected nothing from me," I said, surprising myself with the steadiness in my own voice. That was the problem. Harper cleared his throat softly, the universal signal for a lawyer trying to steer a conversation back to firm ground. "Legally speaking," he said, "the codicil is valid. It was witnessed, notarized, and filed. Ridgeview LLC and all associated interests belong to Noah now. There is no contest on that basis." He looked at me. "What you choose to do with it, Mr. Clark, is entirely up to you." Entirely up to me. A concept so foreign in this family. It might as well have been another language. I sat back in the chair, the leather creaking under my weight, feeling everyone's eyes on me. My father was dead. His will had been read. The old script, Lily inheriting everything while I watched from the sidelines, had cracked clean down the middle. In its place was a new, ugly, glittering truth. There was a hill outside of town with my name on it, and enough money under it to rewrite a lot more than the balance sheet. The only question now was whose story I was going to rewrite first. We left Harper and Lowe's office in 3 different directions. Uncle Ray was the first to stand. He squeezed my shoulder as he passed, his palm rough and warm. "Come by the house later if you want to talk," he murmured. "Or don't. Just don't go drinking yourself stupid over this, okay?" I managed a nod. "I'll be fine." He gave me a look that said he didn't quite believe me, then shuffled out, $10,000 richer, and probably the only person in the room who hadn't come in with a script in his head. My mother rose next. She moved slower than usual, like gravity had doubled. The pearls at her throat looked suddenly heavy. She didn't look at me. Not directly. Her eyes slid across my face like I was a stranger in a grocery store she wasn't sure she recognized. "We'll talk about this as a family," she said stiffly. "After I've had time to process what your father did." What your father did. Not what happened. Not what we did. Always the other person's action, never their own. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Sure, Mom," I said quietly. "Whenever you're ready." She flinched at the word mom like I'd slapped her. Then she smoothed her skirt, lifted her chin, and walked out the door with the brittle dignity of a queen whose crown had been dented. That left Lily. She didn't sit back down. She stood there in the middle of the room, arms crossed, staring at me like I'd just stolen her reflection. Harper busied himself with straightening papers, giving us the illusion of privacy. "So," she said finally. The word was sharp, scraped raw of all the practiced charm she usually layered on. "Congratulations. Noah finally wins something." I swallowed, my throat dry. "This isn't a game, Lil. Isn't it?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "That's all it's ever been. Moves and counter-moves. Make Lily look good. Make Noah feel small so he'll finally act right. Dad just didn't tell us you were going to get a queen on the last turn." "You already got the board," I said. "The house. The company. He wanted me to have." "What?" she cut in. "A consolation prize? A pity hill." My patience, thin to begin with, frayed. "It's not about the money," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "Not only, anyway." He was trying to admit he screwed up with me. "That's new." She snorted. You think a scribbled apology and a pile of rocks makes up for 35 years? No, I said. I don't. But it's more than I thought I'd ever get. For a heartbeat, something like pain flickered across her face. The carefully groomed confidence slipped, and for a second I saw the little girl underneath. The one who'd sat next to me on the porch steps when we were 10 and 13, whispering that she wished Dad would stop yelling so much. Then it was gone, buried under anger. You always act like you were the only one who got hurt, she snapped. Dad's pressure wasn't a picnic for me either, you know. Being the one who has to live up to everything? Who has to carry his damn legacy? Do you have any idea? Yeah, I said softly. I do. But at least someone was carrying you while you were carrying it. Her mouth snapped shut. Her eyes went glassy for just a second. You're not the only one with scars, Noah, she said, voice lower. He just gave us different kinds. We stood there, two grown adults who'd spent their entire lives orbiting the same man, realizing maybe for the first time that the gravity had crushed us in different ways. Harper cleared his throat gently. If I may, he said, and we both turned, grateful for the interruption. Emotions are going to be high for a while, he said, looking between us. I've seen families tear themselves apart over less than this. Your father knew this was a controversial choice. He still made it. You'll all have to decide what to do with that. Legally, Lily said flatly. There's nothing I can do. Legally. Harper spread his hands. No, the codicil is strong. Morally? That's your own arena. She stared at him, then at me, then looked away. I have a meeting, she said abruptly, grabbing her bag from the floor. We'll talk later, Noah, after you've had time to gloat. I'm not gloating, I said. She didn't answer. The door clicked shut behind her, the sound as final as a gavel. The hallway outside felt narrower on the way out. As I reached the top of the stairs, Harper's voice stopped me. Noah. I turned. He was standing in his office doorway, the codicil in his hand. Do you have a minute? He asked. I hesitated, then nodded and stepped back inside. He closed the door behind me, the latch clicking softly. I'm not supposed to give personal opinions, he said, leaning against the desk. But your dad, this last bit. It meant something to him. I studied his face, the lines around his eyes, the tired compassion of someone who'd sat with too many families on too many days like this. He talked about me? I asked. It came out smaller than I intended. Harper nodded. More than once, actually, especially after that first hard incident. He'd come in, lists of things to put in order. Businesses, charities, Lily's role. Every time, when we were done, he'd sit back and say, what about Noah? I let out a humorless breath. Let me guess. He didn't know what to do with me. Something like that. Harper smiled faintly. He'd say he's a good boy. Hard-headed, but he works. Just not in a way I understand. The words landed strangely. I'd spent most of my life thinking Dad saw me as lazy, irresponsible, a waste of potential. Hearing that he'd called me hard-headed, but he works, felt like someone had reached back in time and translated his gruffness into a language I could understand. So why the land? I asked. Why not just leave it all in the trust and cut me a check like he did in the Mainwell? Why ring-fence this one thing? Harper looked at the page in his hand. Because, he said slowly, this was the one thing he hadn't already told a story about. The house was for the family. The company was for Lily. Every dollar in those accounts had already been assigned a meaning. The ridge, that was blank until he filled it in with your name. I thought of Dad standing on that hill, hands on his hips, looking out over dead trees and scrub with that assessing gaze he'd always had for properties. Had he seen me there? There's a lot of money under that dirt, Noah, Harper said quietly. You could walk away from everything with it. Start over somewhere nobody knows you. Or you could use it here. Do something that's yours, finally. That seems to be everyone's favorite suggestion, I said dryly. Fresh starts. He huffed a little laugh. They always sound simpler on paper. He handed me a slim folder. These are the Ridgeview documents. Title, mineral rights, the preliminary contracts with the exploration company. Read them. Don't sign anything new until you've got your own counsel. I'd be happy to recommend someone independent. Independent. The word tasted good. Thanks, I said, taking the folder. It was heavier than it looked. One more thing, he added, as I turned to go. Whatever you do with this, remember, you don't owe anyone a performance of gratitude. Your father left this for you because he chose to, not because you begged. You're allowed to feel however you feel about it. I met his eyes. There was no judgment there. Just that same, tired compassion. How did he feel about it? I asked, leaving it to me. Harper thought for a moment. Relieved, he said finally, and scared he'd left it too late. Outside, the sky had gone from dull gray to bruised purple. I slid into my truck and let my forehead rest against the steering wheel for a moment, the cool metal biting my skin. My phone buzzed. Lily, we need to talk. Mom is spiraling. Don't do anything stupid with that land until we figure this out. A few seconds later. Lily, and before you say it, yes, I know I sound like Dad. I stared at the messages, thumb hovering over the keyboard. A month ago, I'd have killed for a "we need to talk." That wasn't about me screwing up. Now, all I could think was, of course this is how it goes. They knew every inch of the old map. The new one terrified them. Noah, I'm not signing it over to you, if that's what you mean. The typing bubble appeared almost instantly. Lily, Jesus, Noah. That's not what I said. Noah, yet. There was a long pause this time. Then, Lily, just don't vanish, okay? For once in your life, don't run off to lick your wounds in some bar and leave me to deal with Mom on my own. The words hit something sore and partially healed. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent a lot of years disappearing when things got hard. It was easier than standing in a room where you always felt like the extra. I shoved the phone in my pocket without replying. I didn't drive to a bar. I drove to Miller's Ridge. It was a 20-minute trip outside of town, past the old industrial park and the new housing developments with their identical beige boxes. Then the landscape opened up into fields and low, scrubby hills. I turned off onto a cracked county road marked by a faded sign, Miller RD. The orchard came into view around a gentle bend. It looked smaller than I remembered, but maybe everything from childhood does. Rows of gnarled apple trees, half dead, half stubbornly clinging to life, stretching up the slope. The farmhouse that once sat at the base had collapsed in on itself years ago, the roof a broken spine. But higher up the ridge, things were different. Orange survey flags whipped in the breeze. Metal stakes marked a rough grid. A temporary chain-link fence enclosed a section where the hill had been cut open in a long, raw wound. Big, dirt-caked machines sat idle behind a locked gate. The sign on the fence read, "Property of Ridgeview LLC. Authorized personnel only." And under that, in smaller text, the logo of a mining company I vaguely recognized from the news. My name wasn't on the sign, but legally, it was everywhere beneath my feet. I killed the engine and got out. The air was different up here, colder, drier, carrying the smell of turned earth and machine oil instead of the wet concrete of town. I walked up to the fence, fingers brushing the cold metal. Through it, I could see the exposed face of the hill, layers of clay and rock in colors I didn't have names for. It didn't look like money. It looked like a wound. I leaned my forehead against the fence and closed my eyes. Memories came in a jumble. 10-year-old me and 8-year-old Lily racing up this hill, our shoes sliding in the dirt. Dad yelling from the bottom, "Stay where I can see you," even as he laughed. Me finding a weird, chalky rock and shoving it into my pocket, convinced it was some kind of fossil. Showing it to him later, expecting the usual eye roll. For once, he'd taken it, turned it over in his hands, his brow furrowing. "Where'd you find this?" he'd asked. "Up on Miller's Ridge," I'd said. "Near the old fence." What? He'd kept it, put it on his desk. A few months later, he'd lost interest in us playing on the hill. He'd tell us to stay home, to play in the yard instead. Said the farmers had complained. He'd never said he'd bought the land, or that he'd seen something there that had nothing to do with fossils. "You're full of secrets, old man," I muttered under my breath, opening my eyes. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I considered ignoring it, then sighed and answered. "Yeah. Mr. Clark?" A crisp, professional woman's voice. "This is Dana Hart from Ridgeview Mining Group. Your lawyer gave us your contact information. First of all, on behalf of the company, please accept our condolences for your father's passing." I blinked. "Right. Thanks. We were also informed," she continued, "that you are now the sole owner of Ridgeview LLC. We'd like to schedule a meeting to discuss the exploration agreement and the next phase of development." Everything was moving fast. Too fast. "I just heard about all of this an hour ago," I said, rubbing my forehead. "Do things normally move at this speed?" "Not always," she said smoothly. "But your father and our team were in advanced stages of planning. We held off on signing the Phase 2 lease until the estate was settled. There's a lot of interest in this site, Mr. Clark. We'd be happy to walk you through the projections when you're ready. Projections. Phases. Interest. They saw a resource. The town would see jobs or destruction, depending on who you asked. Lily and my mother saw betrayal and leverage. Me? I wasn't sure what I saw yet. Send me everything you've got, I said finally. By email. No meetings until I've had time to look it over. Of course, Dana said. We'll forward the full data room access this afternoon. Take all the time you need. And again, our condolences. She hung up. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and stared at the torn open hill. How many choices had my father layered on top of each other up here? The decision to buy, the decision to keep it separate, the decision to lease, the decision to hand it to me. He'd buried more than minerals in this ground. He'd buried guilt, hope, maybe the version of himself he'd wanted to be. Now it was all in my lap. I crouched, grabbed a handful of dirt, and let it crumble through my fingers back onto the packed earth. In the distance, I could just make out the town, the faint outline of Clark and Company's ugly office building. The steeple of the church Mom still went to every Sunday. Somewhere down there, she and Lily were no doubt deep in conversation. Spinning, planning, rewriting. But up here, for the first time in a long time, there was no script. No one telling me what was for my own good. No one measuring me against anyone else. Just a hill, a contract, and a choice. For the first time since I could remember, the next move was mine. By the time I got home that night, my inbox was full. Ridgeview Mining Group had sent me a link to a secure data room, complete with login credentials and a wall of non-disclosure text. The subject line was cheery: Miller's Ridge, Project Overview and Phase 2 Projections. Harper had emailed scans of the Ridgeview LLC papers. Title: Mineral Rights, the codicil itself. A separate message from him contained a short list of independent counsel I trust, names and numbers attached. And then there were the personal messages, from numbers I barely recognized. Noah, this is Aunt Marie. Just heard about your dad. So sorry. Also, wow about that land. Hope you're okay. Call if you want to talk. Heard the news about Tom, man. Sorry. If you're hiring, my cousin's looking for work. Mike from the union. A handful from old classmates I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. All some version of condolences plus, so I heard. Bad news travels fast. Good news travels faster when people smell money on it. No message from Mom. Just one from Lily, hours after the first. Lily, coming by your place tomorrow at 7. Don't make me break down the door. I stared at it, then glanced around my tiny apartment. It was technically a one-bedroom, but that was generous. The living room and kitchen were one, divided only by a change in the peeling linoleum. My couch was secondhand. My table leaned a little to one side. Laundry hung over the back of a chair, half dry. I'd never invited my family here. Not once. Every time Mom had asked for an address for Christmas cards, I'd given the P.O. box I'd set up downtown. This place was mine. Imperfect, cramped, and entirely outside their gaze. The idea of Lily in this space felt invasive, like bringing a searchlight into a cave. I typed and erased 3 different replies. Finally, I settled on Noah, fine. Noah, don't bring an entourage. I put the phone face down on the table and opened my laptop. The mining company's portal was a maze of folders and subfolders, each more intimidatingly labeled than the last. Geochemical_survey_2019. Phase_1_core_samples. Economic_feasibility_study. Community_impact_projections. I clicked at random. Charts. Tables. Colorful heat maps that might as well have been modern art. Numbers with too many zeros. One document caught my eye. Exec_summary_for_ Clark, the PDF. I opened it. In neat bullet points, a consultant had laid out the entire story. Initial surveys. Confirmation of lithium-bearing clays in commercially viable concentrations. Comparisons to other sites. Conservative revenue projections that made my stomach flip. I scrolled and scrolled. Toward the end was a section titled, Owner Considerations. Client has expressed desire to keep assets separate from existing corporate holdings. Client motivated by wish to provide independent security for other family member not involved in core business. Client concerned about potential community backlash, suggests phased communication strategy. Other family member, that would be me, reduced to a footnote in someone else's planning document. Phased communication strategy. Translation: how to break it to a small town that their dead orchard was about to become a mine. I shut the laptop. Without the screen glow, the room seemed dimmer. The bedside lamp threw a weak pool of light onto the coffee table, highlighting old coffee rings and a scratch where I'd dropped a wrench. My eyes drifted to the Ridgeview folder Harper had given me. The manila edges were already softening where my hand had gripped it too tight. I flipped it open and pulled out the title deed. My name looked wrong there, under owner of record, like someone had pasted it in as a joke. Up until that morning, the biggest asset I'd ever owned was a 14-year-old truck with 180,000 miles on it. Now I owned a hill full of invisible, invaluable metals that entire corporations were salivating over. I didn't feel powerful. I felt off balance. Like the ground I'd been walking on all my life had tilted 20 degrees, and I was the only one flailing my arms. I went to bed late and slept badly. My dreams were a tangle of red survey flags and Lily's disappointed face and Dad sitting in his office, signing papers while I shouted at him through glass he couldn't hear me through. The next evening, at 7:02 p.m. on the dot, there was a knock on my door. It sounded too polite to be Lily's. For a second, I considered not answering. Then I sighed, wiped my hands on my jeans, and opened up. She stood in the hallway in a slate gray coat and heels that didn't belong on my cracked, paint-chipped landing. A gust of cold air followed her, bringing the faint scent of her perfume and downtown streets. Her eyes flicked past me, taking in the cramped living room, the old couch, the stack of dirty dishes in the sink I'd forgotten to finish. A quick, involuntary flash of something, pity, embarrassment, judgment, crossed her face before she schooled it into neutrality. "Wow," she said. "You weren't kidding when you said you were keeping it simple. If you came for an HGTV tour, you're out of luck," I said, stepping aside. "Shoes off, please." She quirked an eyebrow. "Since when are you the neat freak?" "Since the only person cleaning this place is me." She slipped off her heels with a little sigh and padded in on stocking feet, looking strangely younger without the extra inches. She didn't sit right away. She moved slowly around the room, fingers brushing the spine of a thrift store bookshelf, the chipped edge of the table. "God," she muttered, half to herself. "You really made a life without us." I wasn't sure if it was an accusation or an observation. "What did you expect?" I asked. "That I've been living in Dad's guest room this whole time, waiting for you to throw me a bone?" She winced. "Okay, fair." She sank onto the couch finally, crossing one leg beneath her. The cushion sagged a little under her weight. I took the armchair across from her. Distance felt necessary. For a minute, we just sat. The hum of the fridge filled the silence. "So," she said eventually. "Ridgeview." There it was. No preamble, no "how are you?" Straight to the hill. "What about it?" I asked, leaning back. She gave me a look. "Don't play dumb with me, Noah. You own a piece of land that could be worth more than everything in Clark and Company put together, if the projections are right. And Dad left it to you alone. No trust, no boards, no mom. That's huge." "I noticed," I said dryly. She sighed, rubbed her forehead. "Look, I'm not here to say you don't deserve anything. I'm not heartless, despite what you think." "Could have fooled me," I muttered. Her eyes flashed. "You think this was easy for me? Sitting in that room listening to Dad admit on paper that he screwed you over? That he favored me? That everything he ever did for me had a shadow attached to it?" I frowned. "You knew he favored you, Lil. Don't pretend you didn't." "Of course I knew," she snapped. "I'm not blind." But hearing him say it like that, to have the whole town whispering about how poor Lily lost the secret gold mine to her loser brother, that's a whole different level. There it was, the sore spot. "You're worried about what they'll think," I said. "Of course I am," she shot back. "Perception is half of business. Mom's already getting calls. Board members have questions. If this gets out the wrong way, it could hurt Clark and Company, just when I need to prove I can lead without him. So," I said slowly, "this is about you protecting your image, not about me figuring out what to do with the biggest decision of my life." She threw her hands up. "Everything with you is always binary, isn't it? Either it's about you or it's not. I'm saying it can be both. You get something. Great. You deserve something. But if you handle it badly, you could tank the company by association, ruin Mom financially, and turn Dad into a posthumous villain. Is that what you want?" The question hung there. I pictured Mom in the big kitchen on Willow Lane, phone pressed to her ear, trying to smile through clenched teeth while some country club friend offered condolences and fished for details. I pictured the Clark and Company building, the employees who'd been there since I was a kid, watching my father stalk the halls with a clipboard. None of them had asked to be dragged into this. But I also pictured 10-year-old me at the dinner table, invisible while Dad grilled Lily about her grades and Mom beamed. I pictured 22-year-old me moving boxes into a studio like this with no help, because you chose this life, Noah. I rubbed my temples. What exactly are you suggesting? She leaned forward, business mode kicking in, eyes sharpening. Fold Ridgeview into the family trust. Or, at least, into a separate trust we manage jointly. We can structure it so you get income from it, a big chunk even. But ownership and decision-making go through something more official. That way it's not some wild card asset under your sole control. It reassures the board, the town, Mom. Everybody. You mean, I said slowly, give you veto power. She hesitated, then nodded. Shared veto. Yes. And if I say no? I asked. Her jaw worked. For the first time, she looked nervous. Then, she said quietly, we're in uncharted territory. Mom might try to contest. It won't go anywhere legally, but it'll get ugly. The board will panic. The mining company might push harder. The town might find out in the worst possible way. It'll be chaos. All because Dad decided to leave his screw-up son a pile of dirt, I said. Because he decided to do it in secret, she corrected. And you know he did that because he knew how we'd react. That stung. We sat there, the weight of it pressing the air thin. Do you remember Granddad's truck? I asked suddenly. She blinked. What? His old Ford, I said. The blue one. After he died, he left it to me in that scribbled note. To Noah, for all the hours he spent under the hood with me. Remember? She frowned, thinking. Vaguely. I was, 12? Dad hated that, I said. He spent a week talking about how irresponsible it was to give an 18-year-old a V8. How we should sell it, put the money somewhere useful. Mom backed him up. Said it made no sense for me to keep a gas guzzler when I didn't have a real job. Lily's expression shifted. I remember the fight, she said slowly. You yelling. Dad yelling louder. Mom crying in the kitchen. Yeah, I said. At the end of it, I folded. We sold it. The money went into a family fund that somehow only ever got used for your college extras and the new dishwasher. She opened her mouth, then closed it. I told myself then it was the adult thing to do. I continued. To be practical. To not cling to sentiment. But really? I just didn't believe I was allowed to want something that was just mine. Not if it made you or them uncomfortable. I met her eyes. I'm not doing that again, I said quietly. Not with this. Not with something Dad, for the first time in his life, clearly wanted to be mine without negotiation. She looked at me a long time. The hurt, the anger, the calculation all warred on her face. You think this is the same as a rusty pickup, Noah? She said finally. This is millions. This is the town. This is the company's reputation. It's not just about you. And it's not just about you. I shot back. Or Mom. Or how the board looks at you in meetings. If anything, this is the first thing in this entire mess that isn't about your image or their comfort. It's about me having one damn choice that isn't pre-approved. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Silence stretched. I'm not saying I'll never work something out. I added, softer. Maybe there's a way to structure it where the town doesn't burn down and Clark and Company doesn't implode. But I'm not signing it over. Not folding it into some trust where you and Mom can outvote me anytime you get nervous. That would make this whole gesture meaningless. Her eyes glistened. She blinked hard. You really think I want to screw you over? She whispered. After everything he just admitted? I hesitated. Did I? Images flashed. The private jokes at my expense. The smirks. The way she'd soaked up every bit of approval like a plant in a windowsill while I got whatever bounced off her leaves. I thought of Harper's face as he read the codicil. The way he'd said your father was relieved and scared. I don't know what you want, I said honestly. I think you're scared. And when you're scared, you reach for control. That's what he taught us, right? Her laugh was wet and broken. Yeah, she said. Guess so. We sat there, two grown-up children of the same man, both trying not to repeat his mistakes and failing in different directions. Can you at least promise, she said, wiping under one eye with her finger, that you won't sell it out from under us to some faceless corporation tomorrow? Give me that much. Give Mom that much. I thought of Dana's voice on the phone. The eager words. We'd be happy to walk you through the projections. I thought of Harper's warning. Get your own counsel. I promise I won't sign anything, I said slowly, until I've talked to people I trust. Outside this family. Outside Clark and Company. No backroom deals. No sudden announcements. It was the most I could give without tying my own hands. Lily exhaled. Some tension drained from her shoulders. That's something, she said. Okay. She stood, slipping her feet back into her heels, suddenly taller again. For what it's worth, she added, lingering by the door. I'm not sure I'd have had the guts to say no to us. To Mom. To Dad's ghost. I gave a half shrug. Maybe that's why he gave it to me instead of you. She snorted. Don't flatter yourself. Then she opened the door. At the funeral, she said, not looking back. When you didn't speak. I thought it was because you had nothing to say. Now I think it's because you had too much. She left before I could figure out what to do with that. The door clicked shut behind her. Alone again, I sank back into the chair and stared at the Ridgeview folder on the table. In the last 24 hours, I'd gone from being the son who never quite measured up to being the fulcrum of a decision that could tip the entire Clark family and half the town, one way or another. All my life, I'd been told I wasn't responsible enough, that I couldn't handle big things. Now, for once, I wasn't sure if I wanted to prove them wrong or throw the whole damn map away and draw a new one from scratch. Either way, one thing was clear. Whatever I did next wasn't going to be just about Dad's will anymore. It was going to be about mine. The next morning, I did something I'd never really done before when it came to family business. I asked for help on my own terms. I went back to Harper's email, skipped past the Ridgeview attachments, and opened the one labeled outside counsel suggestions. 3 names, 3 firms, short notes beside each. Monica Patel, small firm, very sharp on mineral rights and land use. Not tied to Clark and Company. James L.I., corporate, good with complex trusts. Represented local credit union once. Allison Reed, no relation, despite the name, estate law specialist. I stared at Monica's name for a second, then dialed before I could overthink it. She answered on the 3rd ring. Patel and Singh. Hi, I said. My name is Noah Clark. Charles Harper gave me your number. Said you might be willing to take a look at a complicated land situation. There was a brief pause on the other end, then a low chuckle. If Charles calls it complicated, it probably is, she said. Her voice was warm but brisk. He's not one to exaggerate. Do you have time to come in this afternoon? I blinked. That fast. The kind of people who need me don't usually benefit from waiting, she replied. 2 o'clock. Yeah, I said. 2 is fine. Her office was on the edge of downtown, in a converted bungalow with peeling paint and a sign that looked like she designed it in Word and never gotten around to upgrading. Inside, though, it was all clean lines, plants in the windows, and shelves full of heavy binders. Monica was about my age, maybe a little younger. Dark hair pulled into a messy bun, sleeves rolled up, eyes that missed nothing. She shook my hand firmly, then gestured me into a chair opposite her desk. Charles gave me the broad strokes, she said, pulling a legal pad toward her. Your father owned a parcel called Miller's Ridge under a separate LLC, discovered valuable mineral deposits, started exploratory leases, then left the company to you personally via codicil. Your sister and mother are displeased. That's one way to put it, I said. She smiled faintly. He also said you've already been contacted by the mining company. Yeah, they want to move to phase 2. More drilling, more money, more everything. Monica nodded, jotting notes. All right, let's separate out the noise. Legally, Ridgeview LLC is yours. Full stop. The codicil was properly executed. The only way they can wrest control is if they prove your father was incompetent when he signed it or that you exerted undue influence. I snorted. He didn't tell me it existed. Hard to influence something you don't know about. Exactly. She tapped her pen. So their legal leverage is limited. Emotional leverage, social, business, that's another story. But from a strictly legal standpoint, the ground is solid under your feet, whether you like that or not. I'm not sure yet, I admitted. She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. That's allowed. She flipped to a fresh page. You essentially have 3 broad options. 1, sell. Either the land itself or the company. Cash out. Walk away. 2, lease and negotiate aggressively. Keep ownership. Let the mine happen under your terms. Royalties, environmental safeguards, local hiring quotas, Whatever matters to you. Free. Do nothing. Sit on it. Stall the mine. Protect the land, but give up the immediate financial windfall. Option 3 sounds like I park a tanker full of gasoline next to a match factory and just hope. I said, everybody's already on edge. The company, the town, my family. Possibly, she said. But it's an option, especially if you're concerned about environmental impact or local backlash. Are you? I asked. Concerned. She shrugged. I'm a lawyer, not a geologist or activist. I've seen mining projects bring jobs, and I've seen them poison water tables. The difference is in how they're executed and who's holding the reins. Right now, that's you. That's more power than most landowners ever have. Power. The word still felt foreign. What about folding it into some family trust thing? I asked. Like my sister suggested. Shared control. Joint veto. All that. Monica's expression didn't shift, but something in her eyes chilled a degree. Do you want to fold it into a structure where the same people who marginalized you your entire life can outvote you whenever they get anxious? I hesitated. That's one way to phrase it. It's the legally accurate one, she said. I've seen that movie, Noah. Kid finally gets something of their own. Guilt and optics get weaponized. They drop it into the family pot. And 10 years later, they're sitting in my office asking how to unwind what never should have been tangled in the first place. I thought of Lily on my couch, the way she'd wrapped control in the language of responsibility. I promised her I wouldn't do anything rash, I said. No sudden sales. No surprise headlines. Monica nodded. That's reasonable. Promising not to jump off a cliff without a parachute is different from promising to hand the parachute to someone else. I huffed a little laugh. You're big on metaphors, huh? Occupational hazard, she said. The law is dry. People's lives aren't. She leaned forward slightly, more intent. What do you want, Noah? Not what your sister wants. Not what your mom wants. Not what your father belatedly decided you deserved. You, alone in a room with this hill and this decision. What outcome would let you sleep at night? The question was so simple it knocked the breath out of me. What did I want? I thought of my apartment, my truck, my calloused hands, the quiet satisfaction of a paycheck I'd earned swinging a hammer instead of sitting in meetings. I thought of the mine, the noise, the dust, the jobs, the anger. I thought of packing up, leaving this town behind, starting fresh somewhere nobody knew my last name. I thought of 10-year-old me staring at Dad across the dinner table, silently begging for one scrap of approval. I don't know yet, I said honestly. That's the problem. If I rush, I'll end up doing something just to spite them or just to please them. And I've had enough of living as a reaction. She smiled, small but real. That, she said, is one of the healthiest sentences I've heard from a client in years. She scribbled something and slid the pad toward me. It was a bullet point list. Order independent environmental assessment. Meet with Ridgeview Mining to hear terms, but do not agree. Do not sign anything or verbally commit without counsel. Consider community listening session if, when you're ready. What's this last one? I asked, tapping the bottom line. You grew up here, right? She said. You know this town. Miller's Ridge has been part of the landscape longer than Clark and Company. You start making moves in secret, they'll find out, and they'll fill in the blanks with their worst fears. You own the land. You're not obligated to get their blessing. But if you care about not being the villain in every story for the next 50 years, transparency helps. Villain. The word sat there. I'd spent most of my life as the harmless disappointment. The easy punchline. The idea of swinging all the way to villain was jarring. Think about it, she said. You don't have to decide today. That's the whole point. For once, the timeline isn't being set by your father or your sister or some company. You can take a beat. I nodded slowly. Okay, so your advice, big picture? Don't sign. Don't fold. Don't run, she said. Yet. Learn. Ask questions. And if your family starts making your boundaries their emergency, send them to me. I couldn't help but smile. You sure you want that job? Charging by the hour makes many things tolerable, she deadpanned. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Not certainty, not peace, just the faintest outline of a spine, one that belonged to me. On the way home, I detoured to Uncle Ray's. He still lived in the same sagging bungalow on the edge of town he'd had since I was a kid. The boards on the porch creaked, and the swing hung crooked, but the wind chimes sounded the same as always. He opened the door in a faded Seahawks t-shirt, eyes lighting up when he saw me. Well, look who remembered the way, he said. Get in here before the neighbors think I've upgraded my friends. His living room smelled like old leather and smoke. The TV muttered something about the stock market in the background, volume low. He handed me a beer without asking and sank into his armchair. I took the couch. You look like hell, he observed. Thanks, I said. You're not exactly cover of GQ yourself. He chuckled. Fair. So, how's it feel, son? Being the owner of half a mountain. I ran my thumb along the bottle's label. Surreal. Everyone in town is talking, you know, he said. Half of them think you're about to sell to the first suit that shows up. The other half think you're going to plant trees and hug the hill until you die. And you? I asked. He shrugged. I think you're smarter than they give you credit for. Always have. The words landed heavy and unexpected. You saw what happened in that room, I said. With Mom. With Lily. With all of it. Yeah, he said. Saw Tom's chickens come home to roost, too. I looked at him. You ever try to talk to him about it? About us? He snorted. About how he treated you versus Princess Lily. More than once. You know what he'd say? I shook my head. He'd say, Noah doesn't need coddling. He needs a fire under his ass, Ray said. Said life was going to be hard on you, so he might as well toughen you up. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Mission accomplished. Ray's eyes softened. You know where he learned that? He asked. From our old man. Our dad rode Tom twice as hard as he ever rode me. I was the second string screw-up. Tom was the firstborn, the heir. You'd think he'd have learned what not to do from that. Instead, he just flipped the script. Decided one kid should get the boot and the other the crown. So he punished me for being you, I said. Maybe, Ray said. Or maybe he was just too scared to admit you reminded him of himself. Working with your hands, not fitting into neat boxes. So he tried to beat it out of you. I let that sit. It made too much sense. I'm not saying that to excuse him, Ray added quickly. He still had a choice. You deserve better. I just want you to know it wasn't because there was something wrong with you. That's a lie that'll eat you alive if you let it. I stared at the worn rug. An old stain, grape juice, maybe, blurred the pattern. All those years, I said quietly. I thought if I just straightened up enough, he'd see me. Turns out he did. He just didn't like what he saw. Or he didn't like what it reminded him of, Ray said. Difference matters. We drank in silence for a bit. So what are you going to do? He asked eventually. With the ridge. Right now? I said. Listen. Learn. Not rush. I found a lawyer who doesn't know or care who Dad was. That's something. Ray nodded. Good. 'Cause your mom called me yesterday, you know. My stomach tensed. What did she say? Oh, the usual song, he said. Noah's been given too much responsibility. He's going to ruin everything. Why would Tom do this to us? That kind of thing. Then she hinted maybe I could talk some sense into you. Convince you to share the burden. Share the burden, I repeated. Nice phrase. Yeah, he said dryly. I told her I'm staying out of it. Except for one piece of advice. Which is, he met my eyes. Don't make your decisions around the same table that taught you didn't count, he said. You go up that hill. You talk to your lawyer. To your own gut. Then you tell them what you've decided. Not the other way around. Emotion clawed up my throat. I took a long drink to push it down. You ever think about selling your share of Granddad's farm? I asked suddenly. To Dad, I mean. He blinked. I did actually. He asked. More than once. And you said no. Damn right I said no, he snorted. I told him if he wanted that patch of dirt, he'd have to wait till I was dead. And knowing my luck, I'd probably haunt him from under it. I smiled despite myself. You held on to what was yours. Best decision I ever made, he said. Not 'cause it made me rich. It didn't. That land's barely worth the grass on it. But every time life tried to tell me I didn't own anything, I could look at that deed and go, that's mine. I say what happens there. He leaned forward, lower voice. You've got something like that now, times 1,000. Don't give it up just 'cause you're finally getting invited to discussions you should have been in years ago. On the way home from Ray's, my phone buzzed with a new text. MOM, dinner Sunday. 6 p.m., just us. No lawyers. It's time we speak as a family. Just us. No lawyers. Translation. Come into the arena unarmored. I gripped the wheel a little tighter. Before, I would have felt obligated. Guilty if I didn't show up. I'd have rearranged my schedule and rehearsed apologies I didn't truly owe. Now, with Monica's legal pad in my passenger seat and Uncle Ray's words still ringing in my ears, the text felt different. Like an invitation to a stage I didn't have to step onto. I pulled over in a grocery store parking lot and stared at the message. Then, slowly, I typed, Noah, I'll come. But I'm not making any decisions there. I'm listening. That's it. There was a long pause. For a second, I half expected her to reply with one of her classic zingers. Oh, you're setting boundaries now? Instead, after almost a full minute, the dots appeared. MOM, understood. Just that. 2 syllables I'd waited 35 years to hear in any context. I put the phone down and sat there for a while, engine idling, watching people push carts under the harsh fluorescent lights. If you grow up as the golden child shadow, you learn a lot of wrong things about yourself. That your needs are less urgent. That your voice is less important. That your decisions are up for debate. That you are only as lovable as your usefulness. Sitting there in that bland parking lot, surrounded by strangers buying milk and cereal, I realized I had a rare opportunity. Not just to change my bank balance. To change that script. Not just for me. For everyone who'd ever been told, be grateful for what you're given, while someone else got the world. The ridge wasn't just dirt and lithium. It was leverage. It was apology. It was a test. The next move would show the whole town, and my whole family, who I really was when they couldn't predict it anymore. For the first time in my life, the thought didn't paralyze me. It made me curious. Sunday came faster than I wanted it to. All day at work, my mind wasn't on the pallets I was moving or the foreman's instructions. It was in that big dining room on Willow Lane, replaying 35 years of meals like evidence exhibits. By 5:30, I was standing at my bathroom mirror, shaving with hands that wouldn't quite stay steady. I thought about wearing something new, something that said, look, I've changed. But everything in my closet was either work clothes or worn comfort. In the end, I put on my least faded jeans, a clean button-down, and the jacket Lily always called my one good blazer. It was a little too tight across the shoulders now. The drive to Willow Lane was muscle memory. I could have done it blindfolded. Every tree, every cracked bit of sidewalk was imprinted from 100 childhood bike rides. The house looked the same from the outside. Neatly trimmed hedges. Driveway immaculate. Dad's old truck gone now, replaced by Lily's sleek SUV and Mom's sedan. I sat in the truck for a moment and just breathed. You're not going in there to beg, I reminded myself. You're not going in there to fight. You're going in there to listen and say what's true for you. I knocked once out of habit, then let myself in without waiting. This was still, technically, my mother's house. The smell hit me first. Roast chicken, butter, that slightly floral cleaning product Mom swore by. It smelled like every Sunday dinner from my childhood, just with an undercurrent of something sour, tension, maybe. Mom was in the kitchen, pulling a tray from the oven. Lily stood at the island, chopping something with precision. They both looked up at the same time. For half a second, an old reflex had me bracing for, you're late. Then I checked the time. 5:59. Right on schedule. Noah, Mom said, wiping her hands on a towel. She looked smaller, somehow. The pearls were gone. Her hair, normally helmet perfect, had a few flyaways. You came. I said I would, I replied. Lily gave me a little half wave with the knife. Hey, need help? I asked, nodding toward the plates. Mom hesitated, then gave a short nod. You can take the dishes to the table. The dining room felt weirdly formal. White tablecloth. The good china. Dad's place at the head of the table was empty, of course, but his chair was there, pulled out a little like he'd just stepped away. We sat in near silence while we filled our plates. The clink of serving spoons on porcelain was absurdly loud. It felt like being under cross-examination, except no one had asked the first question yet. Mom cleared her throat once we'd all taken a few bites. I suppose we should address the elephant in the room, she said, folding her napkin carefully. Which one? I asked before I could stop myself. Dad dying, his secret hill, or the fact that we're all pretending this is a normal family dinner? Lily coughed, half laugh, half choke. Mom's mouth thinned, but she didn't bite. Your father's death is not up for debate, she said. Miller's Ridge is. She set down her fork, the metal tapping the plate. I won't pretend I wasn't shocked, she went on. 40 years I stood next to that man through every decision. I thought we discussed everything. Apparently not. There it was again, the sense of betrayal. At him, not me. Did you ever ask him why? I said. Why he bought it under a separate company. Why he didn't put it in the trust with everything else. Her eyes flashed. He told me it was for an expansion, Noah. That's what he always said. A future project. I believed him. We both knew believing and wanting to believe weren't the same thing. But I let it slide. You know now he had other reasons, I said lightly. He spelled them out. In that codicil. Her jaw clenched. Yes, she said. He did. In front of a lawyer. Without giving any of us a chance to respond. Oh, he gave us a chance, I said. It just happens to be now instead of then. Lily put down her knife with a sigh. Can we not turn this into dad-bashing hour? She said. He's gone. He can't explain himself. We're the ones stuck with the fallout. The fallout, I repeated. That's what we're calling an apology now. Mom's head snapped toward me. An apology? She echoed. That's what you heard? What did you hear? I asked. She pressed her lips together. I could see the muscles in her throat working. I heard him say he favored you, I said quietly. That he pushed me harder because he thought I needed it. And in the process, he pushed me away. I heard him admit that, plainly, for the first time in 35 years. Mom's eyes glistened. You think I didn't know he was hard on you? She said. You think I didn't lose sleep over it? He'd yell, and you'd slam your door, and I'd sit in bed wondering if I should go talk to you, or just let you cool off. He always said, don't baby him, Liz. The world won't. You never came, I said, before I could soften it. She flinched. I didn't have anyone telling me not to baby Lily, she said bitterly. She'd cry, I'd go. She'd struggle, I'd swoop in. You were tougher. Tougher or quieter? I asked. Silence hummed. Lily stared at her plate. You have to understand the pressure we were under, Mom said after a moment, voice thin. We didn't come from money. Your father built Clark and Company with his bare hands. We were always one bad year away from losing everything, at least at the start. When he saw potential in Lily, real, marketable potential, he latched onto it. I did too. It felt like insurance. And I felt like a risk, I said softly. Her eyes filled. You felt unpredictable, she admitted. Smart, but stubborn. Brilliant with your hands. Terrible at fitting in. Every time you quit something, every time you left school or a job, it felt like watching a cup slip from my fingers in slow motion. I kept reaching to catch it. Your father kept saying to let it shatter so you'd learn. And then, Lily added quietly, he came and swept up my pieces. We both looked at her. She hadn't moved much during this whole exchange, but her knuckles were white around her fork. You know how many nights I sat in that office with him going over numbers until midnight? She said. How many boyfriends I lost because I chose a Clark and Company meeting over a date. He fed me this story my whole life about how I was the future. He made me feel like if I dropped the ball, the world would end. That's not exactly a kindness. You also got a lot of doors held open, I said. She didn't deny it. I know, she said. I'm not saying I had it worse. I'm saying we were both standing in the same storm. He just handed me an umbrella and threw you a raincoat and told you to man up. I let out a breath. That sounds about right. Mom's shoulders sagged. We were trying to survive, she said. Sometimes that means making ugly choices. Favoring the one who seems likely to save you. I'm not proud of it, Noah. But I don't know that. Back then, I would have done differently. You could have done one thing differently, I said, meeting her eyes. You could have said, out loud, at least once, that you were proud of me. Not for what I could be, for what I was. The words hung there, raw and naked. She closed her eyes briefly, like the truth physically hurt. I am proud of you, she said. I have been for a long time. A bitter laugh bubbled up. You had a funny way of showing it. She looked up, tears tracking down her cheeks now. I remember the day you fixed the neighbor's roof in a storm, she said. You came home soaked and filthy, and your father lit into you about leaving your tools in the truck. I wanted to yell at him, to tell you that was the most selfless thing I'd seen either of my children do in months. Instead, I made you take your boots off in the garage and didn't say anything. Why? I demanded. Why was saying it so hard? Because, she snapped, voice cracking. I was afraid if I praised you for something that wasn't on the plan, you'd think it was okay to keep drifting. To not become someone. I was someone, I said. I was your son. That should have been enough. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Lily pushed her plate away, appetite clearly gone. We can argue philosophy till we're blue in the face, she said. The question is, what now? Dad did what he did. The land is yours. The company is mostly mine. Mom is stuck between us. The town is buzzing. Are we going to let this turn into a cold war that lasts the next 30 years? No, I said. The firmness in my voice surprised all of us. I'm not going to let this poison me for another decade. I went on. I've spent enough time living inside your idea of me. I'm not interested in building a new life just to prove a point. This hill, this money, whatever it turns into, it's not a weapon. I'm not going to use it to hurt you, even if a part of me is tempted. Mom let out a shaky breath. Thank God, she whispered. But, I added, I'm also not going to use it to make myself smaller for your comfort. I'm not folding it into a structure where I get outvoted, not signing away decisions because you're nervous. I have a lawyer. A good one. I'm going to get an independent environmental assessment. I'm going to meet with the mining company on my terms. I'm going to talk to people in town honestly when I'm ready. Then I'll make a decision I can live with, not one designed to keep the Clark family image tidy. You'll talk to people in town? Mom echoed, surprised. What does that mean? It means, I said, that if this mine happens, it'll change more lives than just ours. People deserve more than rumors and after-the-fact apologies. Dad hid this from everyone, including you. I'm not going to repeat that pattern. Lily stared at me. Something like respect flickered through the frustration. You're going to hold some kind of town hall, she said, almost laughing. You? The guy who barely said a word at his own graduation party. Maybe, I said, or something like it. Hi, I'm Noah. I own the hill. Here's what I know. Here's what I don't. Here's what I'm considering. Yell at me now, not when the bulldozers arrive. Mom winced. The optics. Let me worry about the optics. I cut in. You've done that my entire life. Look where it got us. She opened and closed her mouth, then, slowly, nodded. I don't like it, she said frankly. It makes me uneasy. But he was right about one thing. Who? Your father, she said, looking at me, really looking. He said, in that wretched letter, that he'd never given you the benefit of the doubt. That was true. Maybe it's time I try. The words landed heavier than any dollar figure. The benefit of the doubt. From my mother. Thank you, I said. It came out hoarse. Lily sighed, pushing hair out of her face. If you do this, I want a seat in the room, she said. Not to control you. To back you up when the town starts freaking out about Clark greed and outsider companies and whatever else. They listen to me. Sometimes. I can help frame it. So you want to be my PR team? I said. She smirked. That is literally my job description. I waited. Letting her stand beside me would look, to the town, like a united front. To me, it felt like letting the golden child into the one place Dad had left just for me. Then I remembered what Monica had said about transparency and what Ray had said about not making decisions at the old table. This wasn't a decision. Not yet. It was a maybe. Maybe, I said. We'll see. But understand something, Lil. What? This time, I said slowly. If you're in the room with me, it'll be because I asked you. Not because Dad put you there. Her expression shifted. The old smirk faded, replaced by something more vulnerable. I can live with that, she said quietly. We ate the rest of the meal in fits and starts, words and silences layered between bites. It wasn't tidy. It wasn't cathartic. No one rose from the table fully healed. But we'd said things we'd never said. Admitted truths we'd tiptoed around for decades. When I left, Mom walked me to the door. For a second, we just stood there in the entryway, the same place she'd scolded 18-year-old me for missed curfews and muddy boots. I know it's late, she said, eyes fixed on a spot somewhere over my shoulder. But you were always someone, Noah. Even when I was too busy being scared to see it. Emotion squeezed my chest. I nodded, because speaking felt dangerous. She lifted a hand like she might touch my cheek, then thought better of it and let it fall. Drive safe, she said. I stepped out into the cool evening air feeling strangely lighter. Not unburdened, just adjusted. Like someone had finally loosened a belt that had been too tight for years. The ridge still waited. The mine, the town, the money, all the messy, complicated choices ahead. But for the first time, I wasn't carrying them on top of all the unspoken weight from before. Dad had left me a hill full of medals. I was starting to realize he'd also left me something else, buried deeper. Permission. The town hall was packed. They'd put us in the high school gym, the only room big enough. Folding chairs stretched in crooked rows under the harsh fluorescent lights. The smell of sweat and dust and old varnish clung to the air. I stood near the front with Monica on one side and Lily on the other, feeling like I was about to walk out for a boxing match instead of a conversation. When I'd first floated the idea of a community meeting, Monica had raised an eyebrow but hadn't tried to talk me out of it. Just remember, she'd said, you don't owe them a vote. You owe them honesty. That's all. Lily had surprised me by agreeing almost immediately. Better for them to yell at you to your face than turn you into the faceless villain in the diner rumor mill, she'd said. And I can help, like I said. Translate. I'd taken a breath, thought about 10-year-old me running laps in this same gym while Dad critiqued from the bleachers, and said yes. Now those same bleachers were full of people I half recognized. Old teachers, kids I'd grown up with, now older and thicker around the middle. Employees from Clark and Company. Neighbors from Willow Lane. A few guys in suits at the back. Ridgeview mining representatives, trying to be inconspicuous and failing. Mom sat near the front, hands clasped in her lap. Uncle Ray was next to her, arms crossed, gaze steady. The principal, Mr. Jenkins, tapped the microphone a few times, making it screech. Evening, folks, he said. We're here to hear from Noah Clark about the situation with Miller's Ridge and the proposed mining project. I'm going to ask everyone to be respectful. Someone in the back snorted loudly. And to let him speak before we start with questions, Jenkins finished, glaring in that teacher way. Then he stepped aside and nodded at me. My legs felt like they were made of wet sand as I walked to the mic. I'd stood in this spot once before, senior year, to accept a participation certificate for a science fair project Lily had basically done for me. I'd mumbled a thank you and run off stage. This time, I'd chosen to be here. I gripped the sides of the podium, more for grounding than for dramatic effect. Hi, I started. My voice echoed weirdly in the gym. I'm Noah. A few people chuckled softly. A kindness, maybe. I own Miller's Ridge, I said. And I figured you all deserved to hear that from me instead of through somebody's cousin's Facebook post. There was a ripple of uneasy laughter. I took a breath. When my dad died, I went on. I thought I knew how his story ended. House to Mom. Company to Lily. Maybe a pat on the head to me if I was lucky. That's how it always felt. I glanced at Lily. She gave a minute nod, eyes sober. But then, I said, someone found the last page. Literally. A codicil. Turns out he'd bought the ridge under a separate company, found stuff under it, lithium, rare earth elements, and decided, in a fit of late honesty, to leave it to the son he never quite knew what to do with. A murmur swept through the crowd. Some faces looked surprised, others not. I'm not telling you that for sympathy, I said quickly. We all have complicated family stories. I'm telling you because context matters. A lot of you worked for my father. Some of you grew up with me. You know the narrative that's been hanging over this town for decades. Tom Clark building an empire, Lily stepping up to carry it. Me. Somewhere in the background. More murmurs. A few smiles. A couple of winces. I'm not that kid anymore, I said. And my dad isn't here to rewrite his own story. But I am here to write mine. And part of that includes what happens to that hill you've all driven past your whole lives. I nodded toward the back, where the Ridgeview mining reps sat. The company sniffing around Miller's Ridge wants to move fast, I said. They see numbers. They see demand. They see a way to make a lot of people a lot of money. Some of that could be good. Jobs. Investment. Some of it could be ugly. Noise. Dust. Risk. I paused. I'm not pretending I'm an expert, I said. I'm a guy who swung a hammer more than he's read geological surveys. So the first thing I did was hire someone who is an expert. I gestured to Monica. She gave a small wave, eyes scanning the crowd. The second thing I did, I continued, was realize that whatever I decide, you're going to be living with the consequences. You grew up here. I did too. This ridge isn't just an asset in a spreadsheet. It's where some of us snuck our first beers or had our first kisses or cut through on our way to school. Scattered laughter. A few elbow nudges. So here's where things stand, I said. Nothing is signed. Nothing is final. The exploration that's happened so far was under agreements my father made. Phase 2 requires my signature. I haven't given it. I won't give it until I've heard from people whose lives this will affect. A man in the second row raised his hand, not waiting for Jenkins. What about jobs? He called. My kid's been out of work for 6 months. Clark and Company ain't hiring like it used to. You gonna block the one big opportunity this town's seen in a decade because you're working through daddy issues? There it was. The punch I'd been bracing for. I nodded slowly. Good question, I said. I care about jobs. I've worked enough crappy ones to know how much a good one matters. If this mine goes ahead, I want contracts that guarantee local hiring, training, decent wages. I want a community fund built into every ton they pull out of that hill. Not just checks to me and the company. A few people murmured approval. Others looked skeptical. But, I added, I also care about water. About noise. About what your houses are worth in 10 years. That's not daddy issues. That's basic stewardship. So I'm commissioning an independent environmental assessment. Not the one Ridgeview Mining paid for. One we choose. When that's done, I'll call another meeting. We'll look at it together. Then I'll decide. A woman near the back stood, arms crossed. I recognized her, Mrs. Alvarez, who'd run the diner since before I was born. And if the report says it's risky, she asked. If it says the creek might get poisoned, the air might get thick, the noise might drive the deer away and scare our kids, you gonna say no to millions? Walk away from what your daddy left you. The whole gym seemed to lean forward. I swallowed. If the report says it's going to wreck this town, I said slowly, then yes. I'll walk. Not because I don't like money. Believe me, I know what it's like to not have it. But because I grew up here. I know what it means when the people with something to gain tell the people with everything to lose to stop being dramatic. A beat of silence. And if the report says, I added, that it can be done safely if we hold the line, if we get enforceable agreements, not just handshakes, if we can build something that doesn't repeat every mistake this town has ever seen from people in suits, then I'll consider saying yes. But on our terms, not just theirs. A few people clapped. It was hesitant at first, then grew. In my peripheral vision, I saw Lily watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decode. Pride? Surprise? Relief? Maybe all three. Point is, I said, you deserve to hear this from me. Not from a rumor. Not from my sister. Not from a lawyer. From the guy whose name is on the deed. I forced myself to meet their eyes, row by row. I grew up being told I didn't know what I wanted. I said. That I couldn't be trusted with big decisions. Today, I'm telling you that I know exactly what I want on this. Whatever happens next, I don't want to be ashamed of it 10 years from now. The quiet that followed felt different than the earlier silences in that gym. Less prickly, more considering. Jenkins stepped back up, cleared his throat. We'll take a few more questions, he said. One at a time. Hands shot up. That night, we stayed in that gym for 2 hours. People yelled. People cried. People thanked me. People accused me. Through it all, I kept my back straight, my voice level, my answers honest when I had them and blunt when I didn't. I don't know yet. That's exactly what the assessment is for. No, I'm not selling it to some out-of-state hedge fund. Yes, Lily will be involved on the business side if it goes ahead. Yes, my lawyer will be involved. No, my mother doesn't get a veto. When it finally ended, my throat was raw and my shirt stuck to my back with sweat. But I walked out of that gym feeling clean. For the first time in my life, I hadn't tried to be what everyone needed me to be in that room. I'd just been myself. And let the chips fall. Months passed. The environmental assessment came back mixed but hopeful. Significant potential impact if improperly managed, mitigable under strict controls and continuous monitoring. Monica translated that for me into, it can be done, but only if you hold their feet to the fire every step of the way. Negotiations with Ridgeview Mining were long and painful. There were nights I sat at Monica's conference table until midnight, hammering out clauses about water testing schedules and noise abatement and local hiring quotas. Lily sat in on many of those meetings. Sometimes we tag-teamed. Sometimes we argued. Monica, unflappable, refereed. We fought for and won a provision that set aside a percentage of royalties in a community trust, overseen by a board made up of townspeople, not just clerks. Scholarships, infrastructure, small business grants. If this hill is going to change things, I said in one meeting, it's not just going to be for my bank account. Ridgeview's lawyers grumbled. Their rep, Dana, tried charm and pressure in equal measure. In the end, they agreed. Not because they suddenly discovered their conscience, but because lithium demand isn't going anywhere and they needed us more than we needed them. The day I signed the Phase 2 lease, my hand didn't shake. I knew exactly what I was giving up and what I was taking on. Not the neat, solitary revenge script some might have expected. Not the total refusal hero fantasy others might have cheered. Something messier, more human. An imperfect attempt to turn a buried apology into a tangible good. The first time I saw the mine in full operation, months later, it took my breath away. Miller's Ridge didn't look like the hill of my childhood anymore. The orchard was mostly gone, replaced by terraced cuts and conveyor belts. Trucks rumbled up and down the slope. Men and women in hard hats moved like ants. It was ugly. It was also alive. I stood next to a big sign at the entrance that read, Miller's Ridge Project, a partnership between Ridgeview LLC, Ridgeview Mining, and the town of Maple Ridge. Underneath, in smaller letters, Community Oversight Board meets third Thursday of each month. All welcome. A pickup pulled in. A guy I recognized from high school hopped out in a uniform with the mining company's logo, saw me, and grinned. Noah, he called. Heard they made you the Hill King. You hiring? I laughed. Jared, you already work here. Yeah, but maybe you need a personal assistant, he joked. Carry your clipboard. Tell people you're brilliant. I think that's Lily's job, I said. He laughed and headed toward the gate. Behind him, on the ridge, the machines roared. I closed my eyes for a second and let the sound wash over me. This was never going to be clean. Some people would always think I'd sold out. Others would always think I'd left money on the table by not pushing harder, not exploiting more. But I knew the terms we'd put in place. I'd seen the first scholarships go out to kids who'd never have afforded college otherwise. I'd seen the new filtration systems go in at the creek. I'd watched one old guy cry when the community fund paid for the ramp that finally let his wheelchair into his own front door without a struggle. Those were my ledger now, not just dollars. My relationship with Mom and Lily didn't magically transform overnight. We still argued. We still fell into old rhythms sometimes. There were days I walked into a room and felt 12 again, out of place and too loud or too quiet. But there were also new moments. Mom showing up at my place with a casserole just because, then staying to ask actual questions about my work without hidden barbs. Lily texting me a draft of a press release and actually changing things based on my feedback. Ray inviting me to go fishing on Saturdays, and, when I hesitated, Mom chiming in, "Go. You work hard. You deserve it." I didn't forget the years of silence. I didn't pretend a hill full of lithium erased them, but I stopped letting them be the only chapters one reread. One evening, months after the will reading, I sat on the porch of a small cabin halfway up the ridge. It wasn't fancy. One room, a wood stove, a battered couch that folded into a bed. I'd built it with my own hands on a patch of ground outside the blast zone, with Monica's blessing and the mining company's reluctant sign-off. The sun was setting, painting the torn-up earth and the untouched tree line in equal gold. I held Dad's old fishing rod in my hands. Ray had found it in his garage, of all places. "Your old man gave it to me after the fight," he'd said, handing it over. Said he didn't have any use for it anymore. I think he just didn't want to look at it and think about what he'd taken from you. Now it was here. The cork grip worn smooth, the metal eyelets slightly bent. Mine. Finally, my phone buzzed beside me. A photo from Lily. It was a picture of the community center in town, the ribbon cut, people streaming in. Underneath, she'd written, "Community fund at work. You did good, bro." I typed back, "We did." Then, after a beat, Dad helped, too. In his weird way. Dots appeared. Then, "Lily, don't give him too much credit. He'll get a big head wherever he is." I smiled, then set the phone down. The wind stirred the trees. Below, the machines quieted as the shift changed. Somewhere in town, people were sitting down to dinner, some cursing my name, some blessing it, most already moving on to talking about the weather or the game. I looked up at the sky, at the first stars pricking through the blue. All my life, I'd been told who I was in relation to other people. Lily's brother, Tom's son, Liz's disappointment, the kid who could have been something if he'd just. Now, sitting on my own piece of ground, listening to the echo of my father's late apology in the roar of machines and the laughter in a town hall, I realized something simple. I was Noah. Hard-headed, stubborn, better with my hands than with numbers, capable of screwing up gloriously and learning from it. Capable, it turned out, of holding a lot more than anyone had ever trusted me with. We talk about revenge like it's always sharp and loud and final. A slam of a door, a check cashed, a bridge burned. Sometimes, revenge looks like something else. Like not letting bitterness write your story, even when you have every right to. Like taking the last, messy thing a flawed man left you and refusing to turn it into another weapon. Like building, finally, the version of home you needed all along. On paper, my father left me a will, a hill, and a mess. In reality, he left me a choice. And for the first time in my life, I chose me.